the self-improvement journey, like it's not meant to be easy. It can be painful at times, but having tools and allies along the way makes it all the more enjoyable and doable. And then the fruits of that labor is getting back to your truth in yourself. Like you can't put a price on that. So
what if the key to easing your stress, lifting your mood, or finding a deeper sense of calm was hiding in plain sight? Rooted in the earth, whispered through centuries of ancient wisdom, enter ethnobotanicals, powerful plants that have offered humanity ways to heal, connect, and thrive for generations. But in today's world of endless noise, how do you separate fact from fiction and unlock their benefits responsibly? We're joined by Christian Rasmussen, the visionary behind MN Nice Ethnobotanicals. Christian isn't just an expert. He's a relentless explorer of plant-based wellness, passionate about peeling back the layers of mystery surrounding plant-based medicine. His path to ethnobotanicals wasn't paved with curiosity alone. It was forged in the fire of personal struggle. No fluffs, no shortcuts, just an honest conversation about what these botanicals can do for you. Get ready to rethink what wellness could mean. Good afternoon, Christian. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
of course, thank you for having me, man. Happy to be here.
Oh, man, I'm really interested in this topic. I saw your website and saw the cool stuff you guys are doing, but the term I don't know that people listening are as familiar with, and I'm learning. So I was wondering if we could maybe start at the root. What are ethnobotanicals and why are people seemingly interested in them again?
Yeah, so ethnobotanicals are essentially any botanical would be a plant. A lot of people include fungi and botanicals, and ethnobotanical would be any plant that has historical use in various cultures. So it's the cultural use of various plants and plant medicines, as we'll call them. And I think a lot of the reason that there's a big resurfacing, which is wonderful, is that humanity is looking to reconnect with their roots. And I think there's a lot of disdain, unhappiness with the current medical system. I mean, the current system in general. And plants and mushrooms are a really wonderful route to begin reconnecting with our roots and bringing us back into alignment with Earth and this great mother that we all live on.
I agree. And I was going to ask, like, how far back are we looking when we say, because some people, they're just on social media and they're saying, oh, this is like some kind of a wellness trend, but like this goes back ancient times. Like, how far back does this go?
It's hard to say really how far back it goes, but so I mean, Amanita muscaria is our bread and butter. It's the red mushroom with white dots that you see in Alice in Wonderland and Mario Brothers. It's the mushroom emoji on your phone. We we work with tons of different plants, but that's the crown jewel of them, we'll say, although it's a fungi and not a plant, but we'll use those interchangeably a little bit. Some of the earliest cave paintings are of anthropomorphized Amanita deities. So humanoid figures with mushroom cap heads with red and white dots on them. It's very, very, very likely, when you get into all of the evidence and data, kind of hard to refute that Amanita was. So the original of the world, the fertility cults were mushroom cults as well. And these cults led to the foundational religions of the world. So you have the Vedic hymns where they worshipped Soma. Soma was the only god in the Vedic hymns that actually had three-dimensional form, and it was the red mushroom with white dots. All the other gods were etheric gods, entities that didn't have actual dimensionality in this realm. So it was the famed drink of the gods in the Vedic hymns. There's a lot of evidence. John Allegro was one of the three scholars tasked to deciphering the Dead Sea Scrolls. Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, I think, 40 or 50 years ago. It completely, we won't say it rewrote the origins of Christianity, but it threw a wrench in kind of the current narrative. And John Allegro, and I believe the other two as well, came forward and stated, they stated that according to the Dead Sea Scrolls, it looked like either Jesus was an allegory for this mushroom, or Jesus was spreading the mushroom around, which maybe is a little bit more palatable to people. I think a lot of people in the religious construct have a lot of issues with those theories just in general, but regardless, there are images, some of the earliest depictions of Adam and Eve have them covering themselves with Amanita muscaria caps instead of the fig leaves that we hear about nowadays. There's countless depictions of Jesus with his halo being red and white, or pictures of him being crucified with an Amanita cap on his head. So it's hard to say really how far back it goes, but it really, I mean, we can theorize that it goes back really to antiquity and to the beginning. And that even it may be potentially like this mushroom in particular, but inclusive of other products that we carry and other ethnobotanical plants, like they had a hand in writing the human story. So Blue Lotus is another great one that we carry. King Tut's tomb, when his sarcophagus was open, his body was covered, his mummy was covered in Blue Lotus petals. So yeah, who knows how far back it goes, but there's some pretty profound implications when you start getting into the data.
That's fascinating. Yeah, well, that is as back as far as you can think for whatever your belief system is, like you said, right?
Yeah.
If it's Christianity or otherwise, that's taking you way back. But for you, you're a young guy. Like, what drew you into this world of plant medicine?
Yeah. So I mean, I've always been interested in it. Like when I was a teenager, I would spend my time when I wasn't out with my friends or doing whatever. I would spend my time on the internet researching different plants and different pharmacology of different substances. Like that's what I did. So I've always been super interested in it. I've been in the plant medicine realm really since I was a teenager. And then I got really heavily involved in some bad substances and in addiction throughout my 20s. And I was a very functional addict. I was in real estate. I studied, physics in school. Nonetheless, I was, pretty in the depths of my own darkness throughout the entirety of my 20s. At 28, 29, I realized it was unsustainable. I was going to die if I kept doing it. Not to mention my life was kind of falling apart. And I decided to get off of all substances, but while getting more connected to plant medicines, because I believe that there are substances that can help one expand, and there are substances that make one contract. And I was utilizing a lot of substances that made me contract, and not the ones that would help with my expansion. And I got off of opiates at 29, and then at the tail end of 29, I got off of benzodiazepines. So benzodiazepines are typical anti-anxiety medications: Xanax, Klonopin, Ativan, Valium. They're some of the most addictive drugs on the face of the earth, and they're known to be the most difficult drugs to get off of, which is crazy because 10 plus million people are prescribed and addicted to benzodiazepines in the US. But it's an epidemic that's not spoken about nearly as much because people aren't dropping dead from it left and right like they are the opioid epidemic. But nonetheless, it's definitely as pervasive, if not more pervasive. And the drugs are really ridiculously hard to get off of. Withdrawal can last years at times. I know people that have been off of them completely 7 years later and are still extraordinarily sick. It's really brain damage that one's dealing with at that point. It's not technically withdrawal, but nonetheless, it's very similar. So I was off of benzos for a year. I was still extraordinarily sick, maybe healed like 5-10%, it felt like. And I was on a hike contemplating the end of my life because I just couldn't deal with it anymore. It was too much. It was too painful. And I could get into really what it was like, but that's a story for another time. But I was on this hike and I turned a corner and there was this patch of orange mushrooms with white dots, and just absolutely stunning in nature. I'd maybe seen them in nature once before. Magnetic, extremely magnetic. And there was this heart pull towards them that it's hard to put into words. The best way that I can explain it is sometimes you meet somebody, maybe a future lover or something like that, and you feel this magnetism towards them, this heart pull. It was the same sensation that I got with these mushrooms, but it was unbelievably potent. And there seemed to be like an energetic exchange, and looking back on it, they seemed to speak to me, and they kind of told me, in retrospect, they essentially said, "We have something for you, Christian, and you're going to do something for us in return." I'm like, okay, let's see. And I picked them, and I went to the house, and I started doing research, and there was no positive information online. It was all, these mushrooms are poisonous, they're toxic, don't take them. And then horror stories of people eating copious amounts raw to the ground, which I've learned now is very incorrect. That's not how we use them. And we can get into that a little bit later. And having really bad experiences, which I like to kind of akin to, like, if you're a 16-year-old and you decide that you want to have your first drink and you just down a bottle of vodka, like, not the right way to go about it. But people didn't understand how to use these properly. And then there was one woman online who was talking about them positively. She just created her YouTube channel maybe a few months prior to this, and I watched some of her videos, and she had the same story as me. She was contemplating killing herself, walking in the woods, and found these mushrooms. And same deal, energetic pull, so on and so forth. And she broke down the science of it, and they hit the GABA and the glutamate system, which are the two receptor systems that benzodiazepine damage. And I did some further research and, built my own thesis up around it. And a few days later, I decided I was going to give it a shot. And I microdosed them, and instantaneous relief. It was miraculous. It was as if I was drowning for, a couple years prior, and finally I could breathe again. And so I microdosed them consistently, and within 2 weeks, I'd say around 80% healed. But it was miraculous as well, because it wasn't just when I was on the mushrooms I felt better. When I stopped them after that 2 weeks, I still felt better. It was as if it rewired my brain and healed the brain damage that benzodiazepines cause. Yeah, it's one thing led to another, and 6 months later, the business was formulated, and we were the first to bring Amanita here to the West, and or at least to the States. And it's grown and evolved over the years, and now we have a plethora of different ethnobotanicals. But Amanita is the backbone and the bread and butter. Yeah, that's the short inception story.
No, that's vivid. I mean, that's really, really interesting to hear, and that you shared the same experience, right, with the woman you found online. That's remarkable, to kind of hear how it took you from a place you were at and just elevated you to, I would imagine you attribute most of that day to where you are now.
Absolutely.
How you started your company. Yeah, like how did you start this company? Like the name, how did you decide, okay, I'm going to take this experience, so to speak. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but maybe taking what you went through and now using this as a vehicle to help others, and because more people should know about this.
Yeah, it's so interesting because so the company was originally a CBD cannabis company here in Minnesota. And my friend brought the idea to me as I was starting benzo withdrawal, and I thought it was maybe a little overambitious of me, but I thought it was a good idea to have a company to build while I was going through this withdrawal, which was extraordinarily difficult, but we managed. And so I had this CBD company, and I actually nothing happened through my own volition, we'll say. So I reached out to this woman who's named Amanita Dreamer, who gave me the information that led to my healing. And I had the cannabis company, so I offered to sponsor one of her videos. And I wrote her this 4-page letter, a really lovely letter. I'd like to find it and reread it at some point. And she agreed, so I sponsored a video of hers, and we started talking. And it was around 6 months later that she actually asked me to start selling in the States because nobody was doing it. So it wasn't something that I strove for or reached for. I think in some sense the mushroom chose me, the universe chose me, which I'm extraordinarily grateful and humbled for. But yeah, so it wasn't something that I strove for. But then, I've taken the mission very seriously, and I very much am of the belief that when I try and make things happen, and I get in the way. So a lot of my mission is just to step back and ensure things are running smoothly and let the steps kind of line themselves up, which has been proven to be really beneficial and work out really well.
Yeah, because you mentioned, the day you came home with those mushrooms, you're researching online, you're finding a lot of negative, press feedback, whatever it might be. Do you think, because I've done the same thing where, when you start researching, it does feel like the search kind of, maybe plays more towards the negative side. Do you think that's more of just a lack of education out there about what plant medicine can do?
I think that that's absolutely a part of it. I honestly think that it's one of the greatest kept secrets in human history. I mean, the fact that it has its such ancient roots. I think that when you get into a lot of the evidence, there's a lot of data that suggests that it was through the Crusades, for instance, or through the dismantling of paganism, we'll say. The mushroom was a backbone for a lot of that, and I think a lot of times it was wiped clean. So there's actually, it's kind of hard to deny once you really look at it that there's almost a concerted effort to demonize it and ensure that it doesn't get out into the public. So one of the things for that, well, people call it poisonous, and really it's not poisonous. If you consume the mushrooms out of the ground without drying them, one can get sick, and that's so that kind of can give some credence and merit to this theory that they're poisonous. But there are no recorded deaths. Maybe I think 2 in the past couple hundred years, and there was very likely tons of other things going on. One would need to eat kilos of the mushrooms to get to a point where it actually could be damaging. That being said, people can have experiences on high doses that can be frightening and lead them to believe that, there's something bad going on, because in high doses they can be very, very psychoactive. But so one of the studies, they put out this study, I believe in the 90s, and they took one of the compounds out of Amanita and isolated it, and it was synthesized, and they took copious amounts of it and injected it directly into rats' brains. And I'm talking like the amount that, like, you would need kilos of the mushrooms to get this amount. And it created brain lesions in the brain. And they're like, oh, it creates brain lesions, it's neurotoxic, And this, but nobody looks into the back data, the amount of the material that they put in. So nobody, like, to the average person, or to the average scientist or whatever who doesn't understand the backstory, it's just, oh yeah, this is neurotoxic, it's poisonous. So like these types of studies are put forth to discredit and demonize the mushroom, it's really too bad. And then a lot of it, I think there's throughout the years, there's been kind of an ingrained paranoia and distrust around plant medicine in general. Fortunately, we're entering a time period where that narrative is shifting largely. And now, compared to 4 or 5 years ago, if you look, you find a lot different information. There's still a mix of misinformation and legitimate information, but the narrative is shifting, fortunately.
Yeah, I do see what you're saying, because when you do a search nowadays, you are seeing a lot more people getting out there talking about the benefits and what people can basically, like you're saying, take a pharmaceutical and maybe substitute it with plant medicine to roughly have the same effects on their well-being, I would say. When it comes to how like do you and your team, I guess, decide which plants that you want to use as products that you can sell and share with others?
Everything is stuff that I've developed a personal relationship that's really what it is. So like, it started with Amanita, and then Blue Lotus came later, and Blue Lotus is something that I'd utilized throughout my 20s, and I really enjoyed it. And then Kava came and Kana came. So they're all plants that I've developed a personal relationship with. Although I guess as we've grown, oftentimes I'll get recommended plants. And again, like, I'm pretty versed in this subject. Like, I've studied this my whole life. So I have a pretty large repertoire, or collection of things that I knew I wanted to offer. But then it was figuring out how to source it properly, because that's a huge issue as well. Or it's something that I want to be involved with, ethical sourcing and working directly with farms or families or foragers or whatever it may be. So that's another big aspect of it, that it takes a while. Once I make the decision that I want to carry something, it takes a while to actually get that material in. And sometimes there's a few things that I've been searching for that I haven't been able to find in the quality and ethical individuals that I need to actually carry it on the website. So, but yeah, I mean, it's really all just plants that I've developed a personal relationship with, or that customers or individuals have asked me to start carrying, and then I've been able to source it properly, and then developed my own relationship with it through the process of carrying it.
Okay, so like the personal relationship you have before you go out and launch something to the customers. Because people, like, they're okay with caffeine. That, like you mentioned, it started as a CBD business. Everyone's grandmother I know rubs CBD right on their
Yeah.
arms or whatever it might be. So there's like, but when it comes to the plant medicine, there's still, like you said, that hesitation. What do you think the first timers should know? Someone that's maybe listening to you, they're on your site. What's something that they should really know when it comes to that skepticism? People who want to, like, they kind of believe in what you're saying, but they just can't get over that hump of, like, I'm just going to try this instead of drinking a pot of coffee every 2 hours,
Yeah, I mean, I think the real big thing is, like, look, we've these medicines are part of our history. It's part of our DNA in a sense. Like, we evolved with the use of these. Our human story has developed alongside the use of these different plant medicines. Whereas, pharmaceuticals, for instance, very recent invention. So I think a lot of it is just looking inward and getting back to our roots. And I think that oftentimes there's a resonance with people. If you look internally, you can feel that resonance, but people oftentimes don't give any credence to that resonance, or maybe there's doubts or skepticism in their mind that knocks them off that path. But I think really, like, looking inward and quieting oneself, you can feel the pull towards various plant medicines, and not everything's for everybody, and it will depend on what, a particular individual is going through or looking for to choose what might work for them. I think there's also skepticism around or hesitancy around psychoactive plants, and I totally understand that, totally reasonable. And maybe, like I said, not all of these are for everybody, but yeah, I think that if one is intrigued, there's already it's pretty evident that there's already that resonance and that pull. And, I would say in general, like, anybody should listen to your body. Your body will always tell you what it wants and what it needs. And if you quiet yourself and listen, you'll be able to move in the direction that the body wants.
That's great advice. Yeah, you should always listen to your body no matter what. When it comes to like your best-selling ethnobotanicals, what are they? Like, because you're mentioning a lot of different products, and someone might say Blue Lotus. I've heard it, but I don't know. What are like sort of the top sellers, and why do you think they're so popular? Are there particular benefits from them that relate to a large percentage of the people out there?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, Amanita is the bread and butter. So the red mushroom with white dots, it works on the GABA system. Other things that work on the GABA system are alcohol or anti-anxiety medication. So it's your inhibitory system. It relaxes one, it lowers stress, it increases sociability. So it's very relaxing. It's not sedating, but it's like it calms one down and puts one in a flow state. Really, really wonderful for people struggling with anxiety or insomnia. Really, really great for insomnia. It can also be utilized for depression, ADD, ADHD, et cetera, et cetera. It really encompasses a lot of different things people might want to use a plant medicine for. And then it's also so powerful because it elicits transformation in people. One of the ways that I like to explain it is, let's say somebody has anger issues. They get in these situations where it evokes reactivity. It brings up anger, and there's no time between it. The body reacts immediately, and all of a sudden you're from 0 to 100. Or you have anxiety, and same deal. Like, you get in a situation and the body's response is nearly immediate, very hard to mitigate and move past. Amanita, since you're so calm and grounded and in a flow, it gives you space in between that reactivity. Not only does it give you space to choose the different path, the higher path, it also very lovingly and gently seems to nudge you in that direction. All the while, so you make that decision and you choose the higher path. All the while, it seems to be increasing neuroplasticity. So new neurons are firing, new synapses are being built up, so that the next time you're in a situation like that, even if you're not utilizing the mushroom, it's a lot easier to move in that direction. And you can imagine that with really any area of your life, like anything that anybody is looking to change or aspect of themselves they're looking to transform or transmute. It allows you to gently move in that direction and then build up the brain and the neural pathways to allow that to continue. And it's really unreal, the stories that we hear and the transformation that we see in tens and tens of thousands of people. So Amanita is the bread and butter. Blue Lotus is wonderful. It's a wonderful, it works really well with dream work. So if somebody's looking to get into lucid dreaming or anything like that, it's a fantastic onergen is what they call those. It's also similarly relaxing, but Blue Lotus works really, really well in conjunction with any spiritual practice, such as meditation or anything creative, such as writing music or writing. It's also a potent heart opener, so it allows people to connect with love and compassion, which is really wonderful, particularly in today's world. Like, we could all use a little bit more love and compassion. Kanna is also a really, really great top seller. Kanna is an African succulent. It works as an SRI, which is a serotonin reuptake inhibitor. So you have typical SSRIs, which are like Prozac, Zoloft, depression medications. They're selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, where Kanna is just a serotonin reuptake inhibitor. And the difference essentially is that Kanna doesn't hijack your serotonin system. It doesn't pull on it. So there's no addiction potential. There's no withdrawal. SSRIs are notoriously ridiculously hard to get off of. Kanna doesn't have that. It also works immediately, where SSRIs need to build up in your system. If you start on Prozac, it'll take a month or so before you're actually getting the effects of it. So Kanna's another big one. And then there's different ways to consume all of these. Generally, and it can be somewhat of a rabbit hole, but generally the easiest place for anybody to start is to utilize something like capsules or tinctures or gummies, which are already pre-dosed out. There's no concern about, getting the proper dose and then taking it from there. And then, if one were to want to look into this and go on the website and dive in. There's all the information anyone could ever want about, how to consume these and what doses to take. And then if there's any further questions anybody has, they can always reach out to us. We're extremely responsive and happy to help anybody.
Okay, so you do. So someone who's new, they like, are there resources I need, or should I go on YouTube and look up? But you actually can interact with the customer, whether it's online or whatever, in person,
Yeah.
to kind of give them suggestions as to what they might be looking for, to what works for them.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we have a whole educational series on the website. There's, articles and blogs that dive into it. And then each product, under the product tabs, there's, suggested dosing instructions. Yeah, I think another really, really important point to make with any sort of plant medicine is intentionality. Like, it goes a long way to set intention. And this is very known in the psychedelic space, but it goes with any plant medicine, whether it's psychoactive or not. Like, setting an intention and having a goal and a reason for taking it and making that very clear can go a long way with getting the effects and benefits that one is looking for.
Yeah, you mentioned goals, because I was going to ask you, are there specific groups of people, age, lifestyle, goals, like you mentioned, that stand out, or is it just sort of like runs the gamut of younger to elderly, a white collar to blue collar? Is it sort of, or do you see a certain type of customer that comes in to your store?
It really runs the gamut. It really depends. I think our largest demographic is probably older women, like 35 plus women. That being said, it's really everybody. Yeah, it's hard to. I don't think there's any group that doesn't have any representation in our little family. But yeah, I think the majority, like the largest group, probably by just a sliver, is like women over 35.
Yeah. No, I get that, because I was curious. You start to meet people in communities. Once you start digging into them, you start to realize, okay, it's not just guys like me. It's, like you said, women here, this age, that age. So you start to form, communities with people, and you can kind of help each other out. So I think that's forming those bonds with those people also helps you be introduced and reduce the skepticism too, when you start to see like-minded people out there. How about going the other way? Are there maybe people who are in certain situations, maybe specific, health conditions, or where these may not be the answer, or something that you wouldn't suggest? Is there ever a time where you say, if you're looking to address this, I would not use plant medicine?
Yeah, yeah. I think first I'll say that for Kana, what I mentioned earlier, the SRI, the one that is similar to SSRIs or antidepressant medication, that should not be mixed with any SSRIs. So if somebody is on Prozac or Zoloft, you shouldn't be taking any Kana. As a more generalized statement, I think it's people that deal with psychosis or schizophrenia. That's generally, one to avoid plant medicines with, depending. I mean, it's all very case specific, but largely through and through, they're generally pretty forgiving. Like, we're not talking about ayahuasca or psilocybin. It's completely different. So it's generally pretty forgiving and welcoming of anybody. But yeah, schizophrenia, psychosis, that's probably one to stay away from these.
Right. Yeah, 'cause you mentioned even anxiety. I think it was Blue Lotus. Like, how would like a plant medicine fit into that? Like, is someone more trying to maybe numb the anxiety, or tune into the cause and being in the moment and trying to address what exactly they're dealing with, is sort of tune into that anxiety?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I think another part of this is that it's all the goal is to transmute it and transform it and work through the roots that cause the issue, whether it's anxiety or depression or whatever it is. And plant medicines seem to do at least the ones that we work with seem to do a really wonderful job at helping one not just move through it in the moment, but move through it as a whole. And that's kind of back to what I was talking about with Amanita. Like, if you're granted more space in between the reactivity time, and it gently nudges you to choose that higher path. Then there's also, what about the trauma beneath it, right? Like, that's a really important aspect of all this as well. And that's, also back to the intentionality. Like, but these are all tools that help us look at and address those traumas with minimizing the pain. Because generally, working through, if something caused pain and that got stored in the body, it's going to take pain to release it. Like, and that's why shadow work is really difficult. That's why healing is not easy. It's not linear. But these tools allow us to, they reflect in us these core wounds and allow us to work through them, minimizing the pain, which is generally really important. So that's another aspect of this, is like when people really start going down the plant medicine rabbit hole and start diving into their own plant medicine journey, things are going to come up. Like those wounds are going to come up, and they're going to come up to be addressed. And now you might be utilizing something that makes it much easier and more gentle to address it. But the fact of the matter is it's likely going to come up at some point. So people need to be ready and conscientious of the fact that like this journey is the healing journey, the self-improvement journey. Like it's not meant to be easy. It can be painful at times, but having tools and allies along the way makes it all the more enjoyable and doable. And then the fruits of that labor is like getting back to your truth and yourself. Like you can't put a price on that. So yeah.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I was going to ask you too, because but maybe it's supplements. You see, we've been hearing lately, oh, if you're buying vitamins on certain websites online, they may be, not the actual product from the manufacturer, so to speak. You seem to care about quality. How can people avoid shady sources or gimmicks that they see online that this plant medicine is going to fix this? Like, how do you sort of cut through the noise there?
That's really hard in this industry. Very, very hard. There are a handful of companies that are doing it right. I'm sure there are more that I don't know about, but it's a hard one. I think a lot of it is, I don't know. I think a lot of it is understanding the backstory and the inception story. And like for me, for instance, one of the things that's really important to me is that the consumer, the customer, they understand my story. They understand like who I am and why I'm doing what I'm doing. And so like I try and put myself out there, and we try and make it so that they're purchasing not from a company, but from Christian, and I think that goes a long way. There are a lot of people of really high integrity in this space, but there are a lot of people that are, it's viewed as it's a burgeoning industry and there's a lot of money to be made. So there's a lot of people that are really in it just for greed. I would also say like, don't go buy mushroom products from smoke shops and things of that nature. Like those are 9 out of 10 times, those are actually research chemicals being marketed as something different. And then there's another great way is to utilize various forums and places where people can review in real time. Things like Reddit's a great resource for getting people's experiences with various companies and other forums. But yeah, I mean, I wish I had a better answer, because it's a tricky topic, and unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there that aren't doing things properly.
And when it's doing things properly, is it because the products aren't, maybe they're not pure and they have contaminants in them, maybe from sourcing or along the way?
Yeah, that can absolutely be an aspect of it. Like I mentioned with the Amanita products or mushroom products in smoke shops, like pretty much all of those are actually research chemicals. They're synthetic drugs, and then they're marketed as something different. In the Amanita space, it can be tricky because they absorb heavy metals and radiation from the soil. So a lot of people will get mushrooms from, next to very populated cities and industry, and there's heavy metals that absorb into the mushrooms. Or there's a lot of the mushrooms come out of Eastern Europe. We've seen irradiated mushrooms come out of Belarus and areas around Chernobyl. So things like that, where people just, they're not, and sometimes they just don't test them, and other times they might know what's going on, but they don't care, and they're willing to sell them anyways. So, yeah.
So it's not really like a regulated industry, so to speak, when it comes to bringing in this plant. Okay.
Yeah, not
So it's
at
good to
all.
know. So it's really the trust system.
Yeah, and it's too bad. I mean, like it's also it's a very difficult thing to regulate. I'm all for more regulations. It also gets difficult. Well, there's a handful of reasons why it is very difficult to regulate that particular mushroom, but I'm all for regulations coming up at some point in the near future. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, if someone is, again, we use the word skeptical a lot, but, cautious, whatever. But they want to get started into something. Is there more like a mild, gentle intro product you suggest that people try, or is it so specific to what they're trying to solve personally?
Sure. I mean, Amanita is gonna always be my go-to for anybody, for really for any reason. So like Amanita is a wonderful place to start, and then one can venture out into other things if they would like. And then we'd start with microdosing. So microdosing is meant to be subperceptual. You're not gonna feel it. And even if you take like larger amounts, it doesn't inebriate you until you get to really ridiculously large levels, which we don't recommend to anybody. Some, people like to do that, but we're not going to recommend it at all. And microdosing is, yeah, subperceptual. You'll barely notice anything initially, but what people notice is over time, their thought patterns begin to change. That voice, that inner critic in the head begins to die down and maybe is replaced by something a little bit more positive. Their anxiety levels will drop, sleep gets better, there's more energy, they're more in a flow state. And to microdose, it's really simple. You would purchase something like gummies or capsules or a tincture, and you take 1 unit 2 to 3 times a day. Once a day is fine too, at night before bed, and do that consistently for a couple weeks, maybe a month, maybe a couple months if you'd like, and then take a pause and reassess, and you can always come back to it. A lot of people will end up doing, a month-long regimen and then take a couple weeks off and then go back to it, and then maybe experiment with a little bit larger amount, so 2 or 3 capsules at once, or gummies or tinctures. And it's everybody's going to have to find their own dose and what works properly for them. But yeah, that's the easiest way to start. Gummies, capsules, tinctures, and then just take 1 unit, 1 dropper full, 1 gummy, 1 capsule at night and in the morning, and go from there. Yeah.
Okay. So when you talked regulation, I wanted to go back to that. Where do you think the fine line, though? Because you're all about respect, for the plants, the cultures they come from. When things become regulated, sometimes they, become commercialized, and
Yeah.
now they're popping up in every convenience store, right? Like,
Yeah.
how do you think the line is sort of balanced so they don't turn into like a trend, at every store you see, right?
Yeah, that's tricky. I think a lot of the regulation for what we're doing is gonna have to come from us. So one of the things that we're working on is building up a collective of other individuals that are in this space that are doing it properly. And we're funding research, we're funding, to get some actual data, because we really don't have that on this mushroom or these products. We're building up platforms to bring in and build up a community, and then the hopes and the goal is to get this group, this collective, so to speak, to kind of be a regulatory body in the space. That's not going to be like a legal regulatory body. I mean, maybe it could get there at some point, but at least it'll be something that if you can get it in the minds of the consumer, it could have a lot of say, and help kind of guide the market and steer it away from these individuals that are doing things improperly. Yeah, I had another bit to go into, but I lost it. But yeah. I mean, I think it's going to have to be self-regulating in a sense. And then the
Sure.
other side of
I was on your website. Oh,
the other no, you're good. The other side of regulation is
please.
like we don't want it to become illegal, because that's like the hardest regulation, and that's another thing that we have to be cognizant of constantly. And I'm not super concerned that it's going to happen, but it is something that we have to be aware of and ready to go up against if that happens. And it would be such a tragedy, because so many people are benefiting so much from these products and from the mushroom Amanita in particular. Like so in that vein too, though, we have a relatively large voice as a community. So if that were to ever happen, we'd have a lot of pushback that would come, which
Yeah, because I was on your website reading. There's like some initiative you launched to fund affordable scientific studies on Amanita. Can you explain the project, its goals, how people listening can help contribute?
Yeah. So I mean, there's no real data on how on really it at all. There's a good amount of data on muscimol, one of the main compounds in Amanita, but there's really no data on how Amanita itself works for various issues or ailments or anything like that. So we've partnered up with a team out of Canada and the Dominican Republic, and they're able to run actual studies for relatively affordably, considering it's done in the Dominican Republic. We're working with a handful of other people as well, and we're in talks with a group from Canada that can do actual preclinical and clinical trials. So the goal is really just to get data about how it would work for anxiety. Like and the thing, it's silly too, because we already know, like we have tens of thousands of anecdotal reports from people that show its efficacy. So we already know the answer to this. We know what the studies are going to look like, very likely, and we're pretty sure about the how and the mechanisms behind it. But you need that data to get it into professionals' hands. So like doctors, for instance, like they're not gonna be okay with, the majority of doctors are not gonna be okay with me saying, well, yeah, I have a repository of anecdotes of individuals who it's helped for. They're gonna want the hard data. So the real reason that we're doing this is to be able to get it into people's hands, which can then bolster up the opinion of the general public. So the research project is really exciting. Hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have some data being accumulated, and from there, then we'll be able to go out. The thing that I really want to study is benzo withdrawal, because we know it works, but if we could get doctors and treatment centers to recommend Amanita for people coming off of benzodiazepines, like that would be a world-changing endeavor. And so that's something that I would really, really love to be able to get data on, which we'll get there eventually. If somebody's interested in helping at all, like on the website, there's information for that, and we really appreciate any help in that regards.
Of course. And so what's next for your company? Are there products that you're researching or looking more into to sort of introduce to your customer base?
We're not, I don't have any products in the pipeline currently. We're doing a whole rebranding right now. So we'll have new packaging and new website. We're releasing our podcast within the next couple weeks, and then building up that platform that I mentioned, which is, going to be a collective of all these different individuals in this space. We're about to release a forum on the website, which is fun. So customers or individuals will be able to communicate with each other about their experiences and how to use things properly, so on and so forth. The podcast is exciting. The research, of course, is exciting. And then, we're getting out more and more into the public. We're working with some really large names whom I won't divulge that as of yet, but at some point in the near future, people will start seeing us a little bit more, which is exciting. And yeah, getting into all the large conventions and festivals, and so things have been fun and exciting. I think that in the next year we're going to be seeing some explosive growth, and hopefully helping a lot more people.
Yeah, and for people who are listening and they want to learn more about you and your website, your work, your store, how to support you, where would be the best place to visit?
So the website is MN, as in Minnesota, Nice Ethnobotanicals. It's a bit of a mouthful, I know. That's part of the whole rebranding process. But MN Nice Ethnobotanicals. You can find us on Instagram or YouTube. Same name, MN Nice Ethnobotanicals. We're all over all the socials and whatnot. But the website's the base. MN Nice Ethnobotanicals.
Yeah, I'll link that in the show notes, of course. Yeah, so people can go and support. And listen, man, thank you so much for your time today. It's been great to talk to you and learn about this world that's always been fascinating to me. But someone like yourself who's like been at the bottom and now really made something positive for yourself, obviously, and helping others, it's just been really, really rewarding to listen to. So thanks for sharing that today.
Yeah, thanks so much, man. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to spread the love.